Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, which was named by Poets and Writers a best book for writers. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host and the executive producer, Estelle Erasmus. And today I am so happy to have Blair Glaser joining us for the program to talk about her memoir, This Incredible Longing: Finding Myself in a Near Cult Experience. So we're going to get into that. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Blair. She's a writer and leadership consultant whose essays have appeared in the Los Angeles Times, People Magazine, Long Reads, Ulster, Quartz, HuffPost, Inside Higher Ed, and others, as well as in literary magazines such as Brevity, Dorothy Parker's Ashes, In Short, and The Mantelpiece. She's read stories live at events such as Writers Read, Generation Women, and the Woodstock Book Fest. Her debut memoir, This Incredible Longing, was published by Heliotrope in February 2026. She lives with her husband and Dr. Vanna White in Venice Beach, California. And you can find more at blairglaser.com. Welcome to the program, Blair.
Thank you, Estelle. It's so good to be here.
So I want to dive into your book, and I just want to start by saying that I think your premise is so different than others that I've seen in that genre. I joined a cult and I healed, or I joined a cult and I was abused, or I joined a cult and I met somebody who hurt me. No, yours has elements of that, but it's really the idea that you joined a cult, and cults are bad. Cults hurt you, but you managed to find the gifts in being in that cult. It not only helped you with your relationships with your family, finding your own voice, and with ultimately finding love or feeling you're worthy of love, and especially helping you on a professional level. So I love that switch in the hook. It really stands out, but it is not just this mental health story, although it absolutely dives into mental health issues. So can you talk about how you came about figuring out how to do that?
Well, it was my experience. I want to say that before my husband moved in, I got married late and I was going through a closet to make space for him. And I found this sack of journals that I had been lugging around from apartment to apartment. The zipper was literally corroded. And I opened it up to go through them. They were just full of whining. And I decided, I'm not going to write a memoir from this. Who did I think I was? I'm going to burn them. But when I got to the ones from the ashram, I didn't, because it had been such a sacred and transformative time in my life, even with all of the abuses that came out of that organization, which I lay out in the book. For me, it was completely transformative. And just to put this in context, this was in the early 90s. The pharmaceuticals that are available today were not then. Prozac Nation didn't really come out until 1994, and I didn't know anyone that was taking it before 1994, honestly. So this was my crazy way of healing myself, of getting the rest and the time before I launched into the wild west of adulthood to recenter and reorient myself.
It's like an artistic journey too, because at your heart, you're an artist. And I can relate to that. I studied voice, I sang, I wanted to be an actress, and I performed in school plays and camp plays. But my dad talked me out of it. He said there's the Hollywood casting couch and all that. And my family sounds a little bit similar to yours with putting the restrictions on and wondering what's your role? How are you going to get where you need to go in life? And especially in their idea of where they thought you needed to go. And you broke free from that by going to the ashram. So, can you talk about some of your conditioning and then how you wanted to put it in the pages of the book?
I wanted people to understand that this incredible longing that I had came from the way I interpreted my experiences in my childhood. I had a very loving family. Honestly, I had a privileged family. Growing up in New York City, it's funny because privilege in New York City is on a really crazy scale, but by all means, it was privileged. And I encountered an emptiness in that world, a real hollowness that I wasn't able to put my finger on. There were no words for it. So when I got introduced to this practice, and Guru Mai said, it is this longing that makes our meeting possible, that opened everything up for me. That word longing, the idea of yearning, made so much sense to me and gave me language from which I could start to heal.
You even write in your book the poem, This Incredible Longing.
Yes. She says, what you search for is within your search. It is longing, not anguish, but longing. It is this incredible longing that makes our meeting possible.
I love that for so many reasons. It's the premise of the book. You had this yearning, this longing, this ambition that was unfulfilled. I can relate to that on so many levels. And then you also decided to use it as the title. How did you decide that?
It came to me. Maybe it was the shower. I don't remember the exact moment. Literally, like it was a download. Like, oh, this is the title.
I love that. And then what about the subhead, finding myself in a near cult experience? How did that come about?
I'm so excited that I get to talk about this because I haven't yet talked about near cult experience. When you hear people talk about their near death experiences, it's very interesting because you're like, well, we don't really know what happens when we die, but they're reporting seeing the light. And that phrase, near cult experience, to me is like the near death experience. I had it. You may not have it, but I'm going to try to translate that experience that I had of seeing the light to you in this book and how it helped me find myself, even though it seems crazy.
It's funny because in the New Yorker article that blew this open,
Oh, God,
they
yeah.
talked about it as a cult, but you're referring to it as a near cult experience. Is it
Yes.
because the way it impacted you was not as severely as those who have been in a cult might say? Or is it that you really wanted to qualify it because it helped you so much?
I think the answer is somewhere in between because my study of cults revealed that they are closed systems. I don't know if you watched The Vow. The leaders had created this system of leverage where if they wanted to leave, their lives were going to be threatened. I said, I want to go, and I left. I went to my family. I was encouraged to go visit my family. So I wasn't isolated in the ways that cults really try to isolate you. And I do believe, this is just a belief, that the organization was not created to swindle people. It was actually born from some true spiritual aspiration. That is my belief. That doesn't mean it's the truth, and it doesn't mean it's not also a cult. But
Right.
in my definition of cult, it was near cult, it was culty, horrible things happened, but good things happened too because it was creating itself as an avenue for spiritual growth.
Even in your prologue, you see this man and you talk about Guramai, and he says, "Oh, she told me not to go to LA, and I did. I went against what she said, and it was a disaster."
It's a total mystery, but just for your readers, so I can put it in context, I grew up in New York City. I had lived there all my life, and I got lost in a park that was basically 4 square blocks long. I looked up and I didn't know where I was. I was all spun around. And then I end up in a hot dog shop called Soul Dog, where the guy is playing music from the ashram. Nobody played music from the ashram. You couldn't get it in Tower Records. I was open, I was listening. And that's when I had been thinking about moving to LA before I got lost. And he says, Gurumai told me not to move to LA, and I did anyway. And it was the worst thing ever. And how can you not just giggle at the confluence of events? That was very much the flavor of experiences that I would have in City Yoga. And so it's still a mystery to me how this plays into my life.
And did you write the prologue in the beginning of putting your manuscript together, or was this a late edition?
The prologue was always the beginning. And I love that you pointed out the prologue was an interesting place to start because the prologue and the epilogue happen outside of the story. More traditionally, the prologue is from within the story and it's a little bit of a teaser. But this prologue happens 10 years after I leave the ashram, after I've rejected it, after I've become a therapist and I know better and I know enlightenment is a scam and all of that. So it's an interesting place to start the book from.
Yeah, and you talk a lot about things in the 90s, the music in the 90s, which I can totally relate to. It just kind of gives this flavor throughout. But I want to go to my question about childhood experiences. How did you weave those in? How did you figure out the structure for that?
It was the hardest thing. I always say I made the rookie mistake of trying to tell my entire life story before getting to the ashram. And through the editing process, I realized I needed to start the book sooner. But I, as I said before, needed to let the reader know that I had a hunger and that it came from experiences within my family. That was the real challenge of this book is how do I give the reader enough of a flavor of the pain that was inside me and enough of the rules and structures of the ashram so that when I got there, they could understand the belief system that I was operating in and do it in a way that's in scene and entertaining. And it took a while.
I think a memoir is most effective when it combines scene and also your thoughts, your feelings, because that's what opens the door to feeling, oh, I can relate to that. And you're very open and honest. You talk about jealousy situations with Gabby. You're very, very open. You talk about Alex, your boyfriend slash short-term fiance, who ended up writing Friends?
Mhm, mhm,
Amazing. Do you talk
mhm.
to him anymore?
I don't. And we have been in touch here and there over the years through social media, but we don't really talk anymore. I think we live in the same city, but our lives have gone in very different directions.
Well, I mean, Friends had a moment 30 years ago. I'm assuming he's done other stuff since then as
Oh,
well.
he's very successful, done many shows. And the thing about Friends is that it's still having a moment.
It is. I was obsessed with it and I used to listen to it every night. And I think we heard about it for Wired, how Friends was this nostalgia moment for me. You know what changed it for me? I hate to say this, but Matthew Perry's autobiography, he just seemed not so nice, you know? And I thought Chandler was so nice. Then listening to him make fun of people and whine, I was just like, oh, I'm kind of turned off now.
I love that you're talking about that because what you're bringing into this conversation is disillusionment. And whatever and whoever we put on a pedestal, they will inevitably let us down, which is, of course, connected to friends in my story.
Okay, so Gurmai, you looked up to her, and what I loved is this is the creative part of you. Anything she said, you kind of transmuted into a good thing. She'd say, she's a nurse, and you'd be like, well, okay, she's looking at me as a helper type. She laughed at you, and you're thinking, well, she's laughing with me, but she wasn't really, as we later find out. Well, maybe
Right.
she was, but
Maybe
we
she was,
don't
we don't
know.
know. I interpreted every single thing that she said. In fact, the nurse thing did feel like an insult. And because I had a lot of training to take care of people in a way that wasn't so empowering, everything that she said penetrated me in this way that sparked a lot of self reflection. So I was very creative in the way that I used our interaction.
She would say something and you'd have it in your head and it would build to the next thing. And the other thing about you, you were really good with getting to places of power.
So into that as an executive leadership coach. Power is big on my radar all the time. Yeah,
And wielding it, but you were able to get past everything to go to the gatekeepers. No matter where you were, you moved up through the ranks. Not everyone can do that because even though you had some other mental health issues, and you talk about it quite honestly,
I do. Yeah.
you were also building on whatever happened in a way that kept you front and center. It's a fascinating way of bringing in what your business of being an executive coach was and that leadership because it was in you in the process of doing everything and moving from the caretaking to programming. You kept building on that. Not everybody did. Your roommate
Right.
didn't. Gabby kind of let it go at some point, but you kept building. And I think that's the grit in you. And they saw that.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you're bringing that up in that way. And what's so interesting is that they saw that in me before I consciously knew that it was there. And that was healing for me because I had come to the ashram very, very down on myself, feeling completely powerless. But I would get these reflections that, no, you're powerful. Here's where you belong. No, you're powerful. Let's get you to help this person that nobody else knows what to do with. I didn't know how they knew that or how they saw that, but they did. And it helped me see my worth and my purpose. And that's the finding myself in the near cult experience.
And even to the end, these people that you couldn't get near them, like the second in command, I think his name was Cash, he saw something in you and he asked to meet with you. And you were like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And he saw that you could write, you sang, you could do more than what you were doing. And I just thought that was so fascinating that in a way they used you, but you used them too because you kept building yourself up and building yourself up. And you were in a very different place when you decided, okay, I've gotten what I needed and now I can move on.
That's right. If it was mutual exploitation, then it really worked.
That's part of what business is, right?
Right. Absolutely.
What did you bring from this experience into the next section of your life when you left the ashram and you were out there in the world, but in a whole different level because you'd had all this business experience with a high level organization, all this programming experience. You became a therapist. And so, what was it that you took with you?
I sat through so many different workshops there, intensives, programs. I saw how to create the arc of an event. I saw how to deliver transformational information. I had that in my bones. I was asked in my early 20s to create a course with some other people my age, for people slightly younger than me. All those experiences then were in me, and after I became a therapist, I ended up running a very successful women's empowerment workshop that was in connection with the play The Vagina Monologues. I didn't know that I was a writer until Guru Mai was like, Blair's a great writer, use her for this. And so I started writing and I started being with myself after hours in our office and finding ways to get the Swami's speech to be better. That was really powerful because when I left the ashram, I ended up working at Playbill Online. And another thing you and I have in common, Estelle, I was the internet's first actor advice columnist with a column called Ask Blair. And I was teaching people how to be an actor. And you were an advice columnist too. I know that.
Yes, Ask the Love Coach, the Dating Diva, all those columns I had. The fact that you were able to derive such goodness out of your experience, is that something that Guru Mai has ever reached out or seen your book or anything?
I don't know. The organization does not like to be written about without consent. So even Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, did not mention Guru Mai or the ashram or the organization in her pray section, even though she was involved with Siddha Yoga and Guru Mai was her teacher. They don't like it. And usually, I think if they were in a better space, I probably would have heard from their lawyers, but they're currently being hounded by lawsuits dealing with Gurmai's predecessor, Baba,
And the sexual
abuse and
abuse,
molestation.
assaults, molestation, which you talk about quite frankly in the book. When you crafted this book, did you know that it was going to be a certain number of chapters, a certain number of parts? You have it in 3 parts, but you have a lot of chapters. You have 24 chapters with an epilogue and a prologue.
No, I did not. And originally, I think it was 4 parts. It didn't end up being that long of a book. I read a lot of memoirs too. I just finished one that came in at 300 pages. So it does have a lot of chapters, but the way that I arranged the chapters kept changing. And the parts I basically knew. And I ended up merging 2 parts into one. And that was that beginning part where I took out the whole first backstory that didn't really need to be part of this story.
I could tell that there was a lot cut. On page 180, you talk about discover new ways to slip into meditation. But when I was invited to take meditation level 2, followed by the final level 3, you truncated that. You're like, okay, I
Yes.
don't have to put the whole experience of taking these meditation classes.
That's right. I felt like I had given the reader enough of a taste of what it was like to be in one of those meditation classes that I didn't need to walk them through that entire process.
I was wondering if you could read a small section on page 48.
Sure. I was actressing in Los Angeles. I had finally gotten a big audition for a TV show. And when I called to confirm my time, they had erased my appointment and they would not reschedule. And I was distraught. I was shrieking and crying, and all of this pain came out of me from this one disappointment. And even I knew that that was strange. And so I went to work at a hair and beauty convention. I was working for a skincare company, and that's where this begins. At the hair and beauty convention, still emotionally raw, I got a break from manning our booth to roam the cavernous hall. Hip hop blasted. Flashing lights and models and hair products were everywhere. In one corner of the convention, there was a serene Japanese flute playing and a pleasant banner advertising Aveda products, a little oasis from all the bombardment. The popular company was in its infancy and displayed a product line of chakra aligned essential oil fragrances that not only protected hair and skin, but transmitted certain vibes to the wearers. The fragrance I was most attracted to was called Equipoise. Ah, Equipoise, my favorite, said the woman behind the counter. I didn't know exactly what the word meant, but I craved it. It means evenness of mind, she said, as if reading mine. Well, now it made perfect sense as to why I was drawn to its smell. With all my ups, downs, and dramatic freakouts, I definitely needed some equipoise. She sold me on its calming properties, but on the plane ride home, I knew a bottle of essential oil wasn't going to fix my problems. I feared returning to the depression I just clawed my way out of, the way it became the master of my life, flattening me, holding the rest of my heart's wants, needs, and desires hostage, isolating me from friends and family. I didn't want to collapse when I got back to LA. I needed more than equipoise, more than a magic chant. I needed a path. Back in LA, I called the LA City Yoga Center and listened to the outgoing message on the machine. It sounded soft and inviting. Welcome to the City Yoga Meditation Center of Los Angeles. We are located on 19th and Broadway in Santa Monica. The following schedule is a list of our free events. I hung up. I called again the next night and the night after, and finally listened to the whole message. I didn't understand the Sanskrit names for the chants they had on the schedule: Guru Gita, Rudram, Shiva Mahimna. But when the message said, our Saturday evening satsang programs with live chanting and a video of Guru Mai start every Saturday at 7 p.m., my ears perked up. That was the one.
I love that. That feeling you had, it was like you knew, it just clicked for you. And what
Yes.
was that like? And how was that writing that passage in the book?
Well, writing that passage in the book was going back to that crazy time. And if you've ever been at a convention and you're a sensitive person, they're super overwhelming. But I think that it was the meeting of that raw longing with a potential way to salve it. I just knew. And that experience happens throughout the book. There's this knowing that this is going to be the next thing I'm doing, even though I did have this awareness that what was happening was crazy. And I want to say, too, that I now define spiritual awakening as a kind of madness because it always looks insane to the people around you. Hallucinogens are very popular right now for being able to heal PTSD and be able to go deeper and understand different aspects of yourself and different layers of yourself. But if you talk to someone while they're on hallucinogens, they just don't make sense. And I do think that that's a cornerstone of spiritual growth, that you have to go through some kind of awakening that won't make sense to the people in your life.
That's so interesting. How much of you being a therapist is in this book, even though you were not a therapist at this time that you're writing about?
I think I always was a therapist. And that also came out in the ashram. So my first job was taking care of this Swami. And she called me out for analyzing her. Here I was, a 23-year-old, and she would have some emotional reaction. And I would analyze it. And she'd just say eventually, what's with the analyzing? Stop it. In some ways, I think I always was a therapist. And again, that became much clearer to me at the ashram when they started pulling me out of places to help people that were in emotional distress. But becoming a therapist for real really helped me put into perspective the woundedness that drove me into this community.
And so you write about your suicidal ideation and the other depressive elements of your personality at the time. Was that hard to write about?
No, it was not hard to write about. It was challenging in a different way. Depression for me is so deadening that I wanted to be able to transfer the feelings and emotions without deadening the reader. And that was interesting for me. It was challenging in a good way. I'm so far from that depression that it wasn't hard on an emotional level. I really feel that there are certain memoirs that you write closer to the event, and I think that you're writing to heal them. And that makes it very difficult and painful. And that's very valid. But I was so far from these wounds that it was really sweet to reconnect with that part of myself and be able to give her a way to connect with the outer world when she had been so isolated and trapped inside her head.
That's really lovely. You had your journals to rely on. A lot of people are writing memoir and they don't have journals to use. What are some pieces of advice that you could share if someone is writing their story or wants to write their story?
My favorite piece of advice is to think about the environment. What did the shades look like? What was the light coming in the room? The physical parts of the memory can be a way to open up the emotional parts of the memory. Now, for something that happened this long ago, you're not going to remember dialogue absolutely perfectly. So you have to give yourself some creative license. I mean, even the dialogue that were in my journals, who knows if I translated that dialogue per word? So you have to give yourself some creative license there, and that may take some skill and craft. But I do think that paying attention to the details of the physical space can help you get back into the scene.
You even say in your author's note, this is a work of creative nonfiction. I relied heavily on my journals to create the narrative. Most names and some identifying features of many characters have been changed, and a minor character became a composite. On rare occasions, the timeline of events has been altered for better storytelling, but all the contents are true. This story is from my point of view as my memory serves, but memory, as we have learned, is totally subjective. Others may tell it differently. I'm going to use this verbatim for my memoir because this is very clever.
Thank you. I've noticed that as we get more litigious and we get more into cancel culture, people are writing very long author's notes. And I chose not to do that. I chose to let the reader take from it what they may.
What is another piece of advice that somebody can do who's writing their memoir and they don't have that access?
Well, one of the things that I know a lot of people do, which I did not have the opportunity to do, is interview. What was your experience? What's your memory? And then do the compare and the contrast. Interview the people who were there if you're in touch with them, get their take. And then, as you've seen in great memoirs like Educated, those perspectives can also be included. My brother remembers it this way, but I remember it this way.
How did your family feel about you writing this memoir? Because a lot of people end up having more issues with their family once they write a memoir.
Not good. My sister is in the book and we're great. But my parents did not handle my retelling of this story well. And we have been in a great place. I love them very dearly, but I did tell some family secrets in this story. I understand if they experience that as a betrayal, and I am so sorry, but I'm a storyteller, I'm a teacher. I had to reveal myself on the page so that I could bring people along with this crazy journey. I could not really sidestep the truth. There are a couple of writers who are so big that they don't have to lay every detail on the page. They have more choice, if I can say. Elizabeth Gilbert is very clear that she does not talk about her family history. And I really didn't talk about it very much. It's not a big part of the book, but I did have to let readers know who I was at the core so that they could really go on the journey with me. And that was my choice.
That's something I'm struggling with. My dad passed away last year. He's not going to be reading it, but my mother is still here. And there are some things that I want to write and I'm wrestling with.
Totally. This is such a respectable struggle. I hear you.
What's next for you? I mean, it just came out. Obviously, it's talking about it, getting the word out, adding this element to what you already do. And people will
Yes.
understand you better. They'll understand your executive coaching, your therapy better by reading this book. So I think that's totally a win.
That's hopefully a win. And I hope that they understand themselves better too in some small way.
Yes, people can relate to you on whatever level, from feeling the lack of value in the beginning to the ways that you looked to others to guide you, finding your voice. There's so many threads and so many elements, including dreams. You use
Yes.
dreams to really good effect in here.
Thank you.
I always tell my students everything has to have a reason. One sentence needs to lead to the next, and you shouldn't have a sentence if it doesn't really have a reason. And so your dreams did have a reason because it moved the story forward. Was that from your journal, or did you think it from your memory, or did you know that that was going to be an important part of the spiritual aspect?
I think there are two dreams in there that were in my journal, but the big dream that never left my memory because when I woke up from that big dream, it was just so textbook. It was so textbook. I'm in my workplace and I was in college at the time and I'm running between the two places looking for myself and I can't find myself and I'm in a panic. And this guru who I'd seen on a video once comes in from nowhere and says, "You're looking for yourself in these places?" It was textbook. I'll never forget that dream.
I love that. And it reminds me of Sari Bond's book, And You May Find Yourself, that title. And I know that
Yes,
Sari is a friend and that Sari connected you to your publisher,
she
Heliotrope.
did. Yeah.
How was that? Was that a good partnership?
It was terrific. I mean, Heliotrope is a small independent publisher, but mighty in its own way. She's a terrific advocate for writing that, as you said, is not the traditional story at the beginning. This isn't the story of growing up in a cult and having to extract myself from it, or getting involved and then finding myself in some basement torturing kids or animals. It's not that story. And Naomi at Heliotrope saw that and saw value in it.
That's wonderful. Well, this has been such a pleasure talking with you, Blair. This incredible longing. It really covers so many threads, so many concepts that are applicable, whether you're looking for spiritual fulfillment, looking for your own voice, wanting to read a story that will transport you into a world that you probably will never be in, but may want to know something about. Thank you so much, Blair.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Follow me at EstelleSErasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.